So you're looking at financial trouble and you don't know the right way to go, but you're really scared of actually filing for bankruptcy and you want another alternative. Hi, my name is Scott Goldstein. I am an attorney focusing on bankruptcy matters. I practice in New York and New Jersey. Standard disclosure: while I am a lawyer, unless you have retained my firm, I am not your lawyer. And if I am not licensed in your jurisdiction, I am not attempting to give you legal advice. I'm just trying to provide some generalized information and some opinions that I have as a person who's been doing this for more than 12 years now. So, dealing with debt's not fun. It really isn't. But the question becomes, what's the best way to do it? Everyone says pay your debts as you come due. That's the best way. If the way to deal with debt is to pay it down if you can. Every other method of dealing with debt has risks. You could end up getting sued. There's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong. So let's start off with best way: pay the bill. Bill comes in, write a check, you're good. If you can't afford to do that, then you have to start looking and seeing what's wrong. Why can't you do it? And the next thing that is almost as good as paying the bill, it's not quite almost as good, but it's got a little bit less damage, I think, but not much, is to do what is called debt management. And to do debt management, you go to a nonprofit entity. You don't go to a for-profit entity because most of those are scams, but you go to a nonprofit entity that will charge you a small fee and will work with your creditors to get you a lower interest rate and a 5-year plan to pay off your debt. Over time, at maybe a lower interest rate, it will negatively impact your credit ultimately because it will report as resolved, not on the original terms, but it's okay. It's kind of like a non-judicially sanctioned Chapter 13 bankruptcy, but it keeps you from having to say that you filed for bankruptcy, and if you can get done with it, great. If you can find a debt management plan that you can afford to pay, and all of your creditors will work with them, or the few that don't, you're up to date with, great, wonderful, do that. The next thing that people always hear about, and these are the guys that really get to me these days, are debt settlement companies. Now, in the states that I work in, New York and New Jersey, they're treated differently. In New York, it's kind of the Wild West. You can kind of do what you want. There is some argument there that the debt settlement companies are engaging in the practice of law, because that's really what I do, is I resolve debt one way or another, even if I'm doing commercial litigation. The question is always, how much do you owe to somebody else and who's got to pay what? But debt settlement in New York is the Wild West. In New Jersey, we have what's called the Debt Adjuster Act, which makes it illegal for a non-attorney or a for-profit entity that is not properly registered and as a non-profit entity in the state of New Jersey to settle the debt of another person. Period. End of story. If you want to settle debt, you've got to be a licensed attorney whose employment is not principally for debt settlement. So you cannot basically rent out your license as an attorney to a debt settlement company. You have to actually be doing other things. Most debt settlement doesn't work very well, and here is why. Most debt settlement, if you want to have the best bang for your buck, involves you throwing a bunch of cash at the problem and hoping the settling entity will take your money and write off the rest of your debt. Here's the other thing. You may be taxed on what you save. So if you settle debt, you're going to get a 1099-C at the end of the year for whatever the difference is between what you owed and what you paid. Why is that? Because when you received the money from the lender, when you borrowed it, you didn't pay tax on that money because there was a counterbalancing debt that you owed to the money you received. When you take away that obligation to repay, you unbalance the scales. There is a provision in the Internal Revenue Code if you are, quote, insolvent, to get rid of that, but most accountants don't always get it. It's not always good. You may end up suffering and having to pay some taxes on that settlement income. The other thing is, if you don't have the money to settle very quickly, you're going to end up getting sued in the interim, especially with the way that the debt settlement companies work, because they take your money, they put it in an account, and they try to settle your bills out or do it on a monthly basis. But if there's not enough to go around, at some point, one creditor or another is going to get stiffed. They're going to get tired of waiting, and they're going to sue you. and then you end up in the joy of having a judgment against you. You end up with wage executions and bank levies and all that other unpleasantness. So the next way of dealing with it is a bankruptcy case. There are significant consequences to file bankruptcy. I'm not going to play games and say, oh, no, it's wonderful and there's no consequence. No, your credit's going to get tanked, but if you're already in debt and not paying your bills, that may not be an issue. You're going to end up having to disclose everything to a trustee and an attorney, and it's embarrassing sometimes to do it, but remember, you're not alone. These are important things you need to consider if you're looking at dealing with debt. Obviously, the last version, which is one that I really say to everyone, don't do this, but I do give the option out there if you need it. Ignore the problem. Hope it goes away. Maybe everyone will ignore you until the statute of limitations passes. That's a good way to end up having, bank levies and wage executions, but if you really want to go that route, that's always available to you as a consumer to just not pay the bill, hope it goes away, and, cross your fingers. Anyway, my name is Scott Goldstein. I am the owner of the law offices of Scott J. Goldstein. Please check out the upcoming videos on this feed about bankruptcy, debt, and how to deal with it. And if you believe that we can help you, please reach out to us. I'm always happy to talk.